Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming to our annual Kidscreen briefing event when Sarah and I take a quick romp through market intel, information and opinions on the various markets where the business of kids media gets done, and helpful hints as to how to make the best of those markets when you're there. Sarah.
While this session is going to be really useful for any market, we're going to, it's that time of year where we really focus in on Kidscreen, which is the upcoming summit, which is held in Miami, and presumably while you're here. It's how to get how to get there, how to get information around the UK delegation. And that's for those that haven't decided whether they're coming yet. And for everybody, it's what's going on in the market and how to make the best of Kidscreen and the best of getting out there and getting work into the UK.
So UK at Kidscreen, the delegation, is supported by our good friends at the Department for International Trade. And this year, DIT are offering a £500 grant to cover travel or accommodation expenses at Kidscreen. And we're posting the link to where you can find information on that in the chat right now. We'll be posting in the chat regular bits of information. So the offer closes on the 7th of December, so you've got to get a move on. But take a look. Eligibility criteria are quite restrictive. It's not an easy one to get. You have to fulfill quite a lot of requirements, but have a look, see if you're eligible. There's a sort of quick check eligibility website you can go to, and then get an application in if you can. It's worth it.
So we've got a lot of contributors. We're really grateful to have so many, and some will be joining later who've got experience of attending not only Kidscreen but other markets, and they've each got different angles and how they're going to go about it. They're going to give you the best advice and tips that they can. First, we're going to look a bit deeper at the state of the market now and what's happening right now with the market so that you can get ready and get out there and pitch whatever your perspective. Just thought it might be worth going through how we're going to work the Q&A and chat. We want to make this as interactive as we can with a number of you coming. So the Q&A stream, which you'll see at the bottom of the screen, is to ask direct questions that are relevant to that session. And that if you put something in there, we will endeavour to try and ask the person on screen the question. And if we don't, we'll try and get you the answer as we can. That's a private question that only comes to us. The chat, which is open for everybody, is there so that you're very welcome to introduce yourself, say who you are and where you're from. And if you've got any other information or anything that you want to put in there, we don't want it clogged up, but it's for you to feel part of the event as much as we can with so many people here. So we're going to leave that open, and hopefully you'll join in, and hopefully you'll have lots of questions to ask. So we're going to move to the first section. I'll
see you later on.
See you, Greg. Where are we now? We put this in because things have been moving and shifting so fast that what we wanted to do was really find out where we are. We have Jocelyn Christie from Brunico Communications, who's here at the last minute because Jeremy, the features editor, became very poorly over the week and incredibly poorly yesterday. So she's very kindly stepped in. And Jocelyn is the jetpack and Senior Vice President over at Brunico for Kidscreen. We're going to have Dominic Gardner, who's the CEO of Jetpack. And we're going to have Shabnam Razi, who's from Big Bad Boo. Currently based in Vienna, has been in New York and in Vancouver, so has a global perspective. We're going to have a quick, as in Greg's words, a romp through, and then hopefully a little bit of a panel discussion as to what's happening in the marketplace. First up, Jocelyn, do you want to just give us where you and your team are seeing the gaps in the content, that, you know, what the gatekeepers might be looking for and market trends that we've got in the months ahead coming up to Kidscreen?
Yes, happy to, Sarah. Thank you. So obviously from our point of view on Kidscreen, we're tracking the industry 365 days a year through our newsletter or through our magazine, and as we're building the program for the conference portion of Kidscreen Summit. So we've got a really good overview of what's happening in the market. I'm going to talk to some of the content trends that we're seeing right now, and we'll be tracking these. We have been tracking these in our publishing products, but we'll also be exploring them more deeply, some of them at Kidscreen Summit. So the first one that we've just taken a really deep dive into in our latest magazine issue is anime. Anime is really exploding right now, and that's driven primarily by a much greater demand by the streamers in particular. And it really plays into an audience trend right now. Kids are looking for ways to really express their niche passions and to come together in sort of fandom communities more than they ever have before. I think it's, again, got to do with the isolation that they experienced during the pandemic, and they were just looking for ways to connect with people. And so anime and a love of anime is a great way to do it. Broadcasters have picked up on that and are looking for more of that content. There's a lot of really great source material from the manga publishing industry. Much of it is untapped. So there's a lot of sort of rich narrative content that producers can pick up on and look at when they're thinking about developing content along these lines. And the good news is that Japan's very, very small production industry really can't handle the full load of the demand right now. So it means that it's opening up opportunities for co-productions and also for international producers to adapt and interpret the genre in their own way, in a way that they really kind of haven't before, because Japan is sort of owned and dominated serving that demand. So that we find very interesting, and we're looking to continue to track that. The other thing that is popping up right now is social emotional curriculum in content. So again, lockdowns and social isolation really stunted a lot of that very critical development for kids. And broadcasters are looking to fill the gap with shows that focus on, sort of more soft skills, processing emotions, accepting and coping with fears and anxieties is a big one, and communicating and collaborating more effectively. There's also at the same time a shift away from edutainment. This is very new. We're going to be looking at this in more detail at Kidscreen Summit. So I think what we saw and what we all experienced as parents and people who just have kids in our lives is that during and coming out of COVID, I think a lot of parents were very, very terrified that their kids were going to be behind, that they had fallen behind, because the schools were closed and everyone was learning online. So that kind of led to a pretty sharp increase in demand for content that would address that gap. But really now we're seeing that those fears are starting to lessen. Kids are back in school. They are adaptable. They're picking it up faster. They're tackling the gap quite effectively. And I think now parents are maybe feeling like they need more room to just be kids. And that is sort of causing a bit of a shift away, at least on the parent demand side, which always, sort of again trickles down to what broadcasters are looking for their channels and for their platforms, into sort of looking at stuff that's a little sillier and lighter in tone and in nature, and maybe without such a strong and obvious educational component. So there's some really great new research that's come out of a company called The Family Room, who will be presenting it at Kidscreen Summit, and it really takes a look at exploring this trend. We've also got a keynote that we'll be announcing in a couple of weeks, I believe, that takes a deeper dive into that as well. And then this is kind of interesting. So, I mean, we all know that, cell phone usage amongst kids just exploded during the pandemic because, they were home, they were bored. parents didn't know what to do with them. So, they were permitted in many cases to use cell phones for entertainment and content more than they probably would have otherwise. And that's causing a pretty big shift towards the development of TV content that mimics the experience that they have had with consuming content online and through social media apps like TikTok in particular. So one thing that we're seeing that's really evident right now is a whole new crop of concepts that are in the works that are vertically oriented rather than horizontally oriented. So for cell phone usage rather than TV. That's really interesting, and there's a few companies that we've written about recently that are doing work along those lines. And then we're also seeing sort of a move towards shorter, punchier, sort of standalone content that again, it's more snackable than sort of a 5-course meal. And that is, that's really being driven by AVOD content consumption and also TikTok, and all of the habits that they got into during the pandemic. Means that kids are really looking for bite size right now. And so we're seeing a lot that's in development right now to serve that need. I think in general, those formats are quite appealing to producers. They are in many cases cheaper to produce, quicker to deliver, certainly, easier to test and tinker with based on audience feedback. And the volume can scale pretty easily if it turns out that they're resonating. So that's really interesting. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about is just music-driven content for preschoolers. So again, just sort of looking at that snackable content trend, what a lot of producers seem to be kind of using as their hook is music. And so we're seeing a lot of nursery rhyme sing-along projects that are starting to percolate in the collective pipeline. And most of them seem to be pre-selling quite well. So we see that buyers are into it. Interestingly, this boom is also attracting a lot of musical talent that has not really had a traditional place in the kids' TV space. So most recently, we've seen some new projects crop up from the likes of rappers Snoop Dogg and Taboo that we'll be tracking as they make their way into production. But that's kind of interesting to see those voices from outside of our industry getting on that bandwagon. Yeah, and that's my top line look, Sarah.
That is absolute gold dust. Thank you so much. And for anybody that hasn't subscribed, they should subscribe to Kidscreen Daily, shouldn't they? So they'll get access to things like this as they come out. But we've got some really good pointers under the headings that you can go back if you haven't read those articles already. So thank you so much. And hopefully we'll get a little catch up at the end and the others will be able to talk to you about those. Dom, I'd like to come to you next.
Yes.
Dom, you're a distributor and you run Jetpack. What are you seeing happening in the marketplace? What are you seeing broadcasters and platforms looking for from your angle?
It's interesting listening to Joss's insights there, because I think a lot of them resonate with us. I think particularly what we would call kind of not necessarily the core of the kids market. I think we're seeing a lot of demand on the extremities, which I would put anime into that bracket. We're seeing that the younger audiences down to younger kids is generating a lot of excitement, like the under 2s, under 3s. I think there's also on the other end, there's a lot of demand and certainly a lot of conversation about where kids meet YA. I get asked all the time about, do we do YA? And we're a kids and family distributor. So I kind of say, well, we sort of do, but then it really depends on what the content is about and what the characters are doing in it. We can, but we choose not to do anything with kids that is not appropriate for kids. So, it may be a family show, but it's got to be appropriate for 5 to 7 year olds. So I think what I'm seeing is a lot of the market is trying to explore those boundaries in sense of what's accessible. And I think anime is one of the best examples, because obviously we all know anime for or Pokemon. But there's also the anime, which you definitely wouldn't put a 6-year-old in front of, right? So it's a catch-all category, but I think it's interesting that kids find it and then they move on into discovering types of content they didn't know existed before. So I think that's a general trend, I think, is the broadening of the type of content out there. And I think, I could also mention, like, we focus on what we call quality content. And I say that in a way to try and maybe differentiate from some of the kind of lower production value content that's the lower value, higher volume, quick to market YouTube style content that's very popular as well. And I think that's driven almost a whole new business model for a lot of producers and for platforms where they're looking, high turnover content, which is, sometimes extraordinarily creative. Sometimes it's just about producing, weekly episodes of something, and that's a fantastic thing to do as well. That's a part of the industry I think that's growing, and I think that's quite technologically led now, because there's a lot of technology around, both in terms of how kids discover content through their device, TikTok, YouTube, the platforms, but also, I'm hearing a lot of people talk about how technology is changing the way they produce content. So at the very high end, you've got the animation, Unreal Engine stuff from video games, Arcane, that kind of stuff that some platforms are totally into and want to know, like, how can we get the next Arcane? Well, it's not so easy when the budgets are so enormous and the people required to produce it, the technology is very, very high. But I think that's still something that we would never have dreamt of seeing. Only in theatrical would we have expected to see this, but now we're seeing it in TV. It's successful on some platforms, and people looking at how can they use that technology to actually create series that look amazing and give you that real-time animation feel. And I think that's an interesting thing. But on the other technological development that we're seeing from a distribution standpoint is, I'd say probably 5 years ago, we all talked about SVOD, subscription VOD, then the next big, an acronym was AVOD. So everybody, was really into AVOD. And now that we have the new one, which is FAST, which I'm sure you'll read about, because anybody picks up any trade these days, it's like, it's AVOD this, it's FAST that, everybody's getting into fast channels, which is very exciting. But I think we're still trying to work out from a distribution, how that benefits us, because a lot of these platforms are all battling for the eyeballs of the same number of kids, and getting kids to discover content through new apps and new technology is never easy. So it's going to be interesting to see over the next couple of years how that translates to eyeballs, and more importantly to revenue that will come from those new platforms. It's FAST has probably been around for maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years. I can't remember the first time we started working with some of the platforms. And some of them are maturing now, so they've done quite well. But then there's a lot coming to market right now. A lot of the established players are trying to work out, what's our FAST channel look like. I heard the other day that apparently YouTube have a FAST channel. I didn't even know about it. They don't call it a FAST channel, they call it something else, but it's out there somewhere. So it's moving very, very quickly. More opportunities for content to reach the audience, which is always great. That's what we want. As long as it doesn't cost us more money to get onto those platforms, because it's still tricky to distribute video files. It's still a lot of management time to manage all those rights. I think we can certainly see a fairly bright future, certainly for the audience, and I think certainly for the diversity of content that we're now seeing in the market. It's amazing.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And I think there's so much to look at in terms of fast channels. And as you say, it's probably you need to go and get advice from a distributor or somebody at the moment, where trying to go in there when it's such a moving target we've got to come together. Information in Kidscreen would be wonderful as well, so that people can look at how they navigate through that minefield. Because I think it could be lucrative, especially trying out things, but how you lift up it will be interesting. Always something new. And talking about something new, I'm going to move to Shabnam. Shabnam, we've known as part of this CMC and Kidscreen when we come out to Kidscreen. And Shabnam is the most wonderful motivational person that we know. You arrived in the kids industry, and I'm going to ask you to tell a bit about your story to show everybody here that you can arrive and go, I want to do something and achieve it. Because I think a lot of people are struggling. So would you like to take us through how you got from not being in the kids industry to what it is that you think the ingredients of success, and by success, just achieving getting your product in front of kids and the right kids?
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for that. Thank you. It's great to be with my colleagues, Jocelyn and Dom, of course. I have been given 6 minutes to very quickly tell you guys about my company and what I do, and also relate that to Kidscreen and the markets as well. So I'm glad we had a little bit on the trends and what distributors and broadcasters might be looking for. I just want to briefly introduce Big Bad Boo Studios. Next slide, please. So we are just an animation production and distribution company. We are based in Vancouver, Canada, New York, the United States, and we just opened a small office in Vienna, Austria. I am originally from Iran. I was born in Iran. I grew up in Austria, and then I went to the US to study. And I studied computer science engineering, and I have an MBA. So I started working on Wall Street, and September 11th happened when I was living across the street from the World Trade Center, which is what shifted my whole world to trying to really educate children about the world. Because when it came down to why September 11th had happened and why all the wars around the world are happening, it became very clear to me that our kids around the world are just not being educated enough on those topics. And if there was more empathy and understanding about different nations, that perhaps in the future we could avoid something like that. So initially I started a online magazine part-time. I was doing it nights and weekends, and I was to educate the world about Iranian culture. And I met an aspiring writer director who had a short 30-minute direct-to-DVD cartoon called Babak and Friends of First Nowruz that introduced the Persian New Year to kids. And I fell in love with the idea of teaching kids about different cultures through cartoons. It felt at the time, this was maybe 15 years ago, that companies like Disney were not doing things like that, and they considered that to be niche. So we tried our hand at it. I produced my first direct-to-DVD cartoon, Babak and Friends, back then, and that morphed into a multicultural series called Mixed Nuts, which was the first show that we created. Fast forward to today, we have 3 divisions in the company, which you see on the slide here. Big Bad Boo Studios is our production house where we produce mostly animated television series. So as an example, The Bravest Night is a Hulu original. 16 Hudson is on TVO Kids with all the sister stations, and SRC Radio Canada. So in English and French in Canada, we produce that series and then sell it around the world. And then shows like 1001 Nights, which is a flagship show based on what North Americans would call Arabian Nights, but the rest of the world knows as 1001 Nights. In the middle, you have Big Bad Boo International Development. So a lot of our work also has curriculum attached to it, where we partner with companies like nonprofits like UNICEF and Save the Children, similar to the Sesame model, but for the older age group. And we roll these out in places like community centers and refugee camps. And then finally, OSNOS, which is our SVOD platform that focuses on multilingual children. Again, we're trying to raise global kids by acknowledging those families that are raising their kids multilingual I have two girls, Aliana 11 and Mila is 7, and I'm raising them with 3 languages, which is how I grew up in Austria. And I think language is a part of that awareness of the world. So it's something we value a lot at Big Bad Boo. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is just my husband and I started the company. It's a little resume. We can go to the next slide. Sarah had wanted me to talk a little bit about our shows. I mentioned The Bravest Night, 16 Hudson, and 1001 Nights. Galapagos X is a climate change series we're currently in production on with MediaCorp in Singapore, as well as TVO Kids and our Canadian sister stations such as Knowledge, SRC, and TFO. And Jocelyn had mentioned the little shorts, the musicals. We have a spinoff from 16 Hudson called ABC with Kenny G, where the cat, when the humans go to bed, he goes down to the boiler basement to a jazz club called Milk and Cookies Bar and teaches the other animals the ABCs. So these are some of our shows, and below are some of the sort of our distribution network where we are able to sell the shows to the broadcasters. Next slide. Another item that I think has now come out thankfully through the conversations that are happening worldwide after certainly COVID and Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement. All of these wonderful changes that we've seen have really affected how transparent we can be about the things that we're doing. And for us, it's a part of our corporate culture. I started the company wanting to talk about Iranian culture, but that has now for us morphed into anything that is not being spoken about, any minority, any underdog that feels like they are not have not been given a spotlight. So as an example, 16 Hudson was one of the first shows to have a child with 2 dads in it. Preschool series. Bravest Night, again, was another one that was on the LGBTQ sort of spectrum in terms of having many different characters that come from those different places. We have this is Mila, my daughter. She just came home from school, so she's just joining us here. So the BIPOC world is kind of very important to us in that we create different workshops for our writers, and we like to encourage young creatives, especially in Canada, where we do most of our writing. We do workshops for not just writing though, but animation and storyboarding, so that we can really try to influence the makeup of the people that are behind the scenes for creating all these shows. What else can I say? If we can have the next slide, I don't know that I have anything else. In terms of, going to Kidscreen, and I know there are lots of people on the call who might be writers, creators, first-time attendees of Kidscreen. I can definitely tell you that, these events are very important for coming together, for meeting new people, for networking, for learning about the trends. I can tell you that from my perspective, I usually try to write and create shows around the things that I strongly believe in. And we know there's so many topics and themes that aren't being discussed that are so important and crucial for kids. So if there are a couple of you out there who have stories that you feel fervently you need to tell, I would urge you to do that instead of chasing some YouTube trend or trying to be the next fill in the blank show that is got lots of L&M around it and making gobs and gobs of money. If you make great content, and if you believe in what you're doing, all of that good stuff will follow. And I think that's kind of the key message that I wanted to part with. Sarah, I don't know how much time I took. I hope that wasn't too long.
No, that was brilliant. I was just going to bring the other 2 in, because I think what you've just flagged up is that passion, and I think something that Dom might be able to talk about is that balance between enough passion that you don't get knocked over by rejection by somebody walking past you, and too much passion that you're not prepared to listen. What do you think the secret to that bit is, Dom?
I mean, it seems a bit harsh to say you can have too much passion. I just think it's controlling that passion, perhaps, is You know, I think you should have like the more passion you have, the better it is. I think it's about focusing on your core message. I think it's getting to the point. I think sometimes if we're talking about, you know, meetings, pitches, or even just impromptu meetings, it's really being able to summarize like who you are and what you want to do to whoever it is that you happen to have the opportunity to sit down with or bump into, whatever. I think that's really important. Obviously, if you have an idea, or it might just be one idea, or it might be two, then yeah, you have to really believe in that and know it inside out, and be ready for every question, but also be ready to take on constructive criticism, or just take on criticism. I'd say, you know, take it on the chin, and don't be deterred, or because there's always, you know, people always say to me, what do buyers want? And I was like, there's 1,000 answers to that question, because there's 1,000 buyers and they all want something slightly different. Even people who maybe are responsible for the same brand, if they're in a different country, that brand might be slightly different. You know, as Shabnam was saying, the world is such a diverse place, and, you know, Cartoon Network in the Middle East is a very different experience to Cartoon Network in the United States of America, and the people running it are very different. And so you've got to really be ready for, somebody might love it and somebody might hate it, but that you know, the passion is always important. Don't be deterred by you know, rejection.
And Jocelyn, you must get feedback after the events. Where do you see the successes landing when you've got that fantastic story? People have been out to Kidscreen. What do you think that secret sauce has been about them landing whatever they've landed?
I think it's the fact that, you know, the Kidscreen Summit gathers everyone in a casual environment, and it really is, you know, sort of the whole kids entertainment industry in one place, without other genres of programming kind of mixing in. Like there are bigger all genre events in the industry calendar, and people who are experienced in the kids entertainment industry are quite good at, you know, at setting up their meetings and operating in that environment. For people who are newer to the industry, Kidscreen is a great event because it is literally just the people that you care about to get your project off the ground, and they're all in one place, and they're all looking to discover new content and do business. So I think it's that framework that, you know, that really sets us apart. And then I think people are just generally in a good mood and looking to have a good time and looking to meet new people. It's you know, it tends to be, it's hectic. It's a busy event, but I think people are accessible. In a way that sometimes they aren't at some of the bigger events where there's more demand on their time. So you can often get a meeting that you wouldn't be able to get anywhere else at Kidscreen Summit. And I think that is a big point of difference.
And last question, which, you know, all join in, but Shabnam in particular, as you're somebody that's got a foot in 3 different countries at the moment. In terms of how the UK shows up, is there anything that we should be aware of? Because things have shifted. We used to get feedback in the way that we are compared to the American markets, how to pitch to different sectors. How do you see, particularly post-Brexit, us on the world stage?
Yeah, I mean, I love the UK. I lived in London for 2 years when I was in my banking prehistoric world 1,000 years ago. I love content out of the UK. I grew up on it. And I think that the UK continues to be a massive force in children's content creation. There are incredible incentives for UK producers and continue to be incredible incentives. There are also incredible co-production opportunities between various countries. So as an example, Canada and the UK not only have treaties, but I feel like the type of content that we look for in Canada, broadly speaking, is very synergetic with the UK. So if there are UK producers out here who, you know, have a show and they're trying to raise money and finance that show, one of the things they might think about is pitching to the Canadian broadcasters And what the Canadian broadcaster will say if they like that show is, do you have a Canadian co-production partner, essentially a production company like ours, who can come into that co-production partnership? And so think about all the different ways with which you can raise money. I think that way because I create the shows, then I go out and finance the shows. And so that's how my mind works. It could be that people in the audience today are just writers and they don't want to worry about the financing. So I'm speaking on that point a little bit about the financing aspect of it, which obviously is one of the most important if you're going to create a show. I think when you come out to Kidscreen, think about those countries that have treaties with the UK and set up meetings with those countries in particular. So for the UK delegate, Kidscreen is an international venue. And so you should be thinking about international partnerships that make sense. Other partnership countries that make sense, I think, are other English speaking, such as Australia or New Zealand, also have good treaties, also synergetic content wise and creative wise. So I would love to work with UK producers.
I'm sure Greg will pick up we need to pass probably back to Greg in a minute, and he will pick up on that with them. We've got the DIT coming and being able to talk about that, and Shabnam and Dominic are able to hang on. Jocelyn, before we go, any last words to the group?
Oh, just looking forward to seeing a really good, strong contingent of UK producers at the event. You bring a lot of heart, you bring a lot of creativity, and the industry needs it. So looking forward to meeting you at Kidscreen in Miami.
Thank you very much. I'm going to pass back to Greg, and don't forget to put questions in the Q&A, which people can answer in a bit. So Greg, over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. And we're going to hold on to a couple of our speakers, Dom and Shabnam in particular. And we're going to now welcome some additional speakers as we have a look now in a little bit more detail at the setup around the world of markets and sort of around the world and round the year, as it were. And we're going to be joined by Paul Mackenzie, by John Rennie, and by Juliet Sabah. And I'll just remind you what Sarah just reminded you of. Please remember to use the Q&A button if you've got questions. Even if you've got questions about the last section, put them in the Q&A, because it might be that I think Jocelyn's staying around for a little while too, so we will be able to answer them directly to you in the Q&A. So we're going to take this sail around the various markets that they're beckoning for your euros or your dollars as delegates. And what I want to try and consider is which are more appropriate for what, the timings of attending in the sort of round of your development of your project, the development cycle, and then how to make the best of them, and how to get those important meetings and how to behave once you get there. Just to introduce our new speakers, John Rennie runs Clothcat Studios in Cardiff. He's an inveterate traveller, so I'm hoping we'll get some top tips on Miami from him. Juliet Sabah, who was Plugin Media's MD and is now running a new operation in Brighton, partnered with Blue Zoo Studios called Brighton Blue. And Juliet brings a digital media perspective as well as an animation perspective to our conversations, which is very welcome. And Paul Mackenzie is a producer who attended his first Kidscreen earlier this year. So we get the point of view of the first-time user, as it were. So may I start with you, Juliet? Juliet, what would you say are the main markets for animation producers, and by inference for sort of writers, composers, and other creatives? So you've got the producers, but for writers and composers as a secondary question.
Okay, so I guess if we're talking about animation, fundamentally, Annecy is probably the top destination. I think, and then MIPCOM, CMC, Kidscreen. And I think that what we tend to look at it as if if you think about a trajectory between business and content, we think that each market kind of sits somewhere on that trajectory, either very businessy or very contenty. And there's probably a kind of fun business, fun content trajectory as well there. So I think it's quite good to have a bit of a mix. So you can go to Annecy and it's very content heavy and it's utterly inspiring and good to take time out of your regular day to day and feel inspired and have the space in your head to think about stuff. However, Kidscreen I see right up on the business end of it in a slightly sort of cliched American style. We're here to do business and we're going to be very, very busy and there's no time for anything else, which it isn't like, but it feels much more serious on the business side of things than other markets. And so I think that's great when you're ready to get out there and pitch stuff and you know, as I think Jocelyn said, it's, you know, everybody's in one place. So, and I would say, you know, I can't speak for writers and composers, but again, I think I'd be looking at the same kind of mix of sort of very, of going to markets for the content, which might be CMC or Annecy, but then if you're there to make connections, sell services and do business, then I'd say it's Kidscreen and MIPCOM.
I muted myself because my telephone rang. You went to CineKid because you're a fairly regular at CineKid. I mean, do you find that useful as in terms of a market, or is it more for intel and connections?
I think it's more for intel. I think a lot of I hate to use the word European producers because I'm a European producer too, but EU producers go there and they present some amazing projects. So I can't say how well those projects are received there and whether they go on to get funding. However, I've always seen some fantastic projects being presented there, and I've presented projects myself there, but I've not done a huge amount of business. They have a very interesting forum day, which has lots of different panels, and you go and sit on different tables, and it's a small market, and I quite like that intimacy and opportunity to speak directly with experts and have a very direct conversation. But I'd say it's more for inspiration and less for selling.
So that's CineKid in Amsterdam, and so let me move on to John, if I may, John Rennie. Does first let's do a sort of sense check. Does Juliet sort of worldview pretty much accord with yours? I mean, you're a slightly larger company, I think. And did I actually call? Did I call you?
No, you said Brighton Blue.
I called it Brighton Blue. It's Brighton Zoo, isn't it? Yes, because I remember seeing on LinkedIn your Dom, your partner's note that he was now CEO of Brighton Zoo or similar, or creative director of Brighton Zoo. I thought, oh, that's a big change. I didn't even know there was a zoo in Brighton. So, but yeah, sorry, Brighton Zoo is the name of the company. So, John, sorry, does Annecy, MIP Junior, Kidscreen, does that accord with your worldview? Is there another view of this?
Yeah, no, to be honest, that was spot on for me. Those are the three that we attend regularly, and each of them have different focuses, exactly as you pointed out, Juliet. Particular, with MIPCOM, it's very random because you're in Cannes, everybody's sitting in cafes, and I several times I've only seen people I wanted to meet in the airport going home in the queue for the security. So sometimes you never see people at all there. Whereas Kidscreen, you're all in the same place together for 4 or 5 days. It's great because you're all on top of each other. You can meet people randomly at dinners and lunches. And it's quite accessible. And then Annecy is kind of halfway, but then you get the benefits of being able to see lots of animation that you would never otherwise see because, and I try and do that. I try and, although you've got to be really quick at getting your tickets for a lot of the screenings at Annecy, really quick. I try and then balance scenes, films, as well as doing business work as well. Just to feel as if I'm still part of the animation industry. Sometimes we go to these things, we forget that we're part of, we're actually supposed to enjoy it as well. It's not all about meetings. So I definitely agree that, I mean, obviously you have a sort of a cartoon forum, but actually I found a number of things very useful to do are, industry trade trips abroad, going to different, obviously Greg, Sarah and I, we've gone to various things over the
China,
years.
yeah.
China,
yeah.
Exactly. There's also, the Canary Islands as well. Sometimes it's useful going to some of these just as part of a smaller thing, but actually you meet people on a more one-to-one basis than you would otherwise meet if you went to a very large kids screen where thousands of people are talking to each other, and you might never get heard.
Yeah, that's we're talking to a Spanish association at the moment who've got some money and they want to bring some people over. They want to try and build some co-production partnerships. So we're hoping to develop something there. It's they are very useful, those very small events. Let me come to Paul. So you went to Kidscreen for the first time earlier this year, but you're more seasoned as an industry player than that. How do you think Kidscreen compared in terms of accessibility of the buyers and so on?
So my first Kidscreen was online. I had a really sort of a modern perspective on it. So it was good to have it there at my fingertips. But there is nothing like being there in person. And so having attended last year, MIP, for example, and while I thought that it was great, everybody told me that this is nothing like normal MIP. But it was really good to be there and meet people and grab people. So I subsequently have been to MIP this year. And it was huge and fantastic. And just as John was saying, what's great about it is grabbing people in the bars and seeing someone whiz past. That's what I found most interesting. And I've just finished yesterday. I was at Content London. And again, that's my first one. And it was all about, while I had loads and loads of meetings, it was more productive just grabbing people. So, for example, Amazon has just given a talk on YA projects, and I was having a meeting with a Canadian producer, and a friend of mine said, they're just over there. So we just ran over and got their details, just explained who we are. And so we're meeting them. So, that was the value of being there in person. It's a bit of planning, but also taking the opportunity to grab people as they whiz past.
So I just wanted to come to you, Dom. I mean, a lot of the time, for producers in particular, and perhaps Shabnam, you could contribute to this as well. Going to a market like Kidscreen or MIP is about another step in the building of a finance profile for your show. Can you talk a little bit about that? Where do you go to do that, and how at what point in the process is it best to do that? Maybe start with you, Dom, but appreciate that Shabnam is the producer in this equation.
The question is, when do we start the finance profile?
Yeah. And where would you go to start that finance profile? Is that done at markets, or is it done outside the market?
What do you mean by finance profile? Sorry, Greg, I'm just.
Well, I mean your funding, your funding proposition.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the short answer is we're always funding. We're always looking for funding and pre-sales, which often come from markets, because if you've got your commission, which you perhaps had a relationship, if you're a UK producer, let's say, you may have a relationship with the BBC or ITV or whoever, and you're able to raise financing from your home territory, which is how most people start their financing journey, is with a local commission or a local interest. Not exclusively, but that's quite common. I think then you've always got a percentage to find, and it can be, 70, 50, 25%, whatever. You're going to go to market to try to identify who are the people at that market who may have access to that level of investment. And is there any one market that is better for that? I'm trying to sort of serve the people who are in that process right now. Yeah, depending on how much you need. Like if it's a significant percentage of your budget and it may end up, so let's say half of the money or more, the people who have the capacity and the budget that to match, say, for example, a BBC investment, they're mostly at all of these markets. I think, if you just pick out the top 10 co-production potential people, they're going to be at Kidscreen. They're going to be at
so you catch them where you can, and in relation to where you've got to in the process.
I was going to make this point actually, but people say, which markets do you go to and when do you go to a market? And obviously your own personal budget is very important. These things are not cheap. They cost a lot of money. I would say it's the time to go is when you're ready, when your project is ready to go. I mean, if you've got the money to go on a, exploratory kind of find out how it works, etc., that's great. But if you're really looking at getting your timing right, then you need to make sure that your project is developed enough that you maybe even have interest from somebody, because then you're going to be in a market and your conversations becomes much more pertinent. So you're sitting down with somebody and say, okay, I have the BBC, I just need, one or two people, I need X percent, I know exactly what it is. So if you get that meeting with that top 10 co-production, they know exactly that what you're showing them, they can make a start to make important decisions in their head, probably, and but will come later after the market. They can start to think this is a real opportunity. This is not just somebody who has like everything to find. So I think get to that stage and identify that market, the one that's coming up, because I don't think you necessarily need to go to them all. You just need to go to the one that's the best fit for when your project is ready. Because but it may well be you don't get to see that person. As Paul said, you're lucky, you get lucky, and there's Amazon. You might not. So you might be then thinking, okay, well, I saw 3 out of 10 I needed. I need to go and find a way to, get in front of those other people. So it literally is a case of chasing people around the world. And once you know what they look like and who they are, and
you can stalk them.
Yeah, well, a little bit, yeah. I think, and don't be afraid of that. I mean, look, I've been doing it for 20 odd years, and I still see people that I'm like, oh, new person.
And they'll still have a drink with you.
Well, they'll still kind of like look at me like, in a terrified way, like kind of lurch at them with my business card in one hand and my catalog in the other. But it's sort of that's the game. That's what everybody.
It's the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that's an important thing for us to recognize, is that the buyers are there for a reason. They are there to buy.
Yeah.
I mean, they might be there just for a jolly and they've got no budget, but let's leave those aside for now. Most of them want to come back with something brilliant and wonderful. And that's where they meet you, Shabnam. So,
yeah.
I mean, would you wish to comment on when you're ready to go to a market?
Yeah, just to add to what Dom was saying, for us, we typically will create a show internally in the company. We do take outside pitches, but most of our shows have been created internally. So you want to develop the show idea internally first. I would recommend getting development funding to do that process. And there are many grants and opportunities in the UK for that type of funding. So that type of funding gives you anywhere from 20 to, let's say, 50K, could be quid or dollars. And typically a development phase would give you something like 1 or 2 scripts, what we call a Bible, which is what the show is, the characters, the premise, what is the world, ideally, what does it look like if you have visuals. Put that package together. It could be pre-development, which is before you have perhaps a broadcaster attached. Then, as Dom said, if you feel like your Bible and your pitch is ready, that's when I would take it to market. For us in Canada, we typically will, show it to our Canadian broadcasters first, as Dom said. Go do the local roundabout in the UK. Go to the British broadcasters with your development stuff. You can do that anytime. You don't wait for the markets to do that. They take meetings all the time, all year round. And ideally get someone attached to that development project. So you have a development project, now you have the BBC attached to it. Then you might spend 9 to 12 months or 18 months doing development with the broadcaster. They might want you to make changes to the script, the Bible, the look of it, all of those good things. Then you take that and you go to Kidscreen. You say, look, I've got this great preschool show. I've got the BBC attached. Now I'm looking for, as Dom said, maybe you're looking for 50% more money because the BBC can only give you 50% of your budget. At that point, maybe you go to TVO or CBC Kids in Canada, and now you're starting to cobble all that financing together. This can happen over a long period of time. Ideally, you want that process to be short, but you are chasing people around the world and you have to be very patient with the process.
Thank you. Just very quickly then to our other three producers, do you want to comment on that process? I'm not sure there is that much development funding available in the UK at the moment, Shabnam, because of course we just lost the Young Audiences Content Fund, which was a fantastic source of development funding.
Oh, there I go putting my foot in my mouth.
It's okay. I usually only open my mouth.
I'll just take it out, and my UK cohort can just kind of take it from there. Maybe there isn't any.
Well,
I know there are lots of questions around that.
Classically, you say the words development funding, and three producers have piled in to say, where? Please tell us.
Where is it?
So I don't know, guys. But there is access to some funding. There is regional funding and so on. John, Juliet, Paul, would you care to comment?
On
development funding.
Yeah, on development funding, yes, it's such a shame about the YAC fund ending, because that was a great resource. So what we've had to do, there are bits and pieces, but what we've had to do is generate our ideas at an early stage, and then broadcasters want to come in at different stages. So sometimes when you have that general idea, that's fine to talk to one of the key broadcasters or a partner, and they like being able to shape. So that's what we've been doing.
You're talking mainly about live action, I think, aren't you, Paul?
Oh yes, I should say, yes. In the live action.
But just to add to that, Paul, I mean, if there are people watching today who are single creators or single writers, one place to look for development funding is with production companies. So as an example, we take pitches all the time. We're not a huge company, but if I take one pitch every year, I would allot, $10,000 to that project internally, so that I can then take that to market with this writer/creator, so that then we could get a broadcaster attached. So maybe the government grants are not there at the moment. I'm sure that will come back in some form because the UK is very good at that. So I would look also to other production companies that are established production companies in the kids space that take pitches from the outside for development funding.
John, just a quick question to you about the regional development funding. Is that something that you have any experience of?
There is, I think, for the nation's spend, there is some developments available in Wales, possibly Creative Wales. It's very slightly random, and it's wrapped up with a lot of other regional targets as well. So I would say Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, they have obviously their own creative agencies. England less served, unfortunately. But yeah, there is some, but it tends to be wrapped up in a lot of other targets as well, to do with employment and things like that. Yeah. So it's not as easy as here's a small bit of money to go and make a project with, and we're chasing that as much as anything else. So yeah, so I think, and as much as I'd love to say I had a load of money to spend on development, I don't. So I'm after it as well.
Juliet, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think I heard about, this is thinking laterally about development funding, and I guess I come at it with a slight from my sort of interactive and digital side of things, but quite often there's innovation funding around, and there is a new fund that's been announced. I think there's a briefing for it next week called UK
3
Creative
million.
Catalyst. And so I'd be looking at funds like that I mean, I don't know any of the criteria about it yet. I haven't gone through it, but if there's ways of developing products or technology as a way of bringing on your IP in a slightly different way, I'd certainly be looking at those kind of pots, because there always seems to be a little bit of an appetite for funding innovation if it isn't there directly for content. I think there's ways to think about it. And there's also kind of on that, we got some funding out of Creative England to make a tool for creating live puppeted animation. And we got a grant from Creative England for that. So I think it's kind of, there's ways of thinking about things differently that can kind of bring on your business.
Yeah. Just to echo that, we did some work on real-time animation with the same thing. It's sort of technology focused, but we've got to have a creative projects in order to show that we've done the work. So therefore, we've been able to use that to our best advantage as well.
Well, that's a bit of an aside. Let's come back to going to markets, and we've talked about when you go. We've talked about which. What about that, the all-important getting meetings? I mean, we've got a question from Steve Smith, which cuts right to the chase, actually. And he says, my main reason for going is to pitch development projects. One block to this is contacting the broadcasters or the streamers ahead of the market. The Kidscreen platform is great, but people don't always reply. So where's the best place to go to find and approach contacts ahead of the market? I mean, I'll come to you first, Dom, but you are in an advantageous position here because, as you say, you've been doing this for years.
Yeah, so we that's partly how we add value to projects and pitches is because of our relationships. It's one thing knowing somebody's name and what they look like and what bar they drink in, and maybe what they drink. Then that gives you some advantage. But really, having worked with somebody time and time again, you do have that kind of almost priority lane access to certain buyers. But I know that's distributors, that's our job. I think but even so, there are new people come to market and we have to find out who they are. And we do like what everybody else does. We read the trades. We look on LinkedIn. We're literally always tracking who's who, and then we find out who they are. Then we have to research, and then we do that thing that distributors always do: is they trade contacts with each other. Somebody will say, "Oh, by the way, who's that new person at whatever? Could you send me their email?" And I'll say, "Well, I will if you send me blah 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 that person." So they're like Pokemon cards. That's how distributors tend to talk to each other. Nobody likes to give contacts away for nothing because there's value in it, and I think that's important. So don't email distributors say, can you just give me all these emails please for all these people? That's not going to work. But if you do have a distributor partner or somebody or a production partner or whatever, then you just got to ask and do research. It's as simple as that. I do think those platforms though, Steve, are pretty much a waste of time. I think no offense to Kidscreen or RX or any of the people that run these events, but these platforms really, as a buyer, and I remember back to my Disney days, you were already so busy on all the emails and the people you regularly, by the time you go through your regular meetings, you have a little bit of time left over for, what we would call randoms or people you've never met before, just give it a go, see what happens. To use a separate system to try and do it, it just never really works.
And if I can add to that.
Yes, go on. No, I was just going to say, I suppose I would say this, but obviously the thing to do is also, as much as possible, use your domestic opportunities. So if you're going to go to CMC, you may be able to bump into some people who, if they're not the broadcasters or platforms, they might know, and, it's building those relationships where you can trade. And that's where CMC and other smaller events like us are good for that. Sorry, Shabnam.
No, I just love both of your answers. I think it's additive. It's that, put yourself in the perspective of the broadcaster for one moment. As Dom said, they are getting so many emails and phone calls, and it just becomes physically impossible, I think, for them to answer everything and to be on those systems. I'm not even a broadcaster, and I don't use the system because, as Dom said, I get 400 emails every day, so I'm not going to use another system to be messaging. Another component to that is that, it's great to have these networking events, but unfortunately, the industry we're in isn't a one-time sport. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's something that you have to keep at. You have to keep going to these things. Things aren't going to just open up the first time you show up, and you have to know that, and you have to be okay with it. You have to be persistent and passionate that you are going to go to these things to build the relationships with the broadcasters. Don't expect a yes on the first time there, and take them for a coffee, get to know them. The better your relationships are with the broadcasters, the more likely they're going to answer your emails. They're going to want to get to know you and learn about your projects. And as Greg said, if you can do that locally, which means it's cheaper and more accessible for you, then those broadcasters will inevitably also introduce you to all these other ones because they work together. So it's a pretty small industry, and you have to get into it and you have to work at that. So don't be disappointed by the messaging systems. Just be persistent and be understanding of people's times.
Paul?
And as somebody who's new to going to these markets, because I've normally produced and been at the other end, what we did, we're a small film company, and I've just started up the TV arm 18 months ago. We booked early in various of these markets, and we blitzed everybody. Now, you only end up getting a handful of meetings, and it's soul destroying. But sometimes there's a bit of a nugget there. So this just literally happened yesterday. So I had a meeting. It was the last meeting of the day of of Content London yesterday, and we were being thrown out of the venue, and we had to go into the main hall, and so I had to pitch. It was just awful. And so you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and then someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Sorry, I couldn't help eavesdropping, but that book that you mentioned happens to be my favorite book. My dad bought it for me, and gave me her details. And she's a finance, she's a financier. And just this morning we were having an email conversation, and it's kind of like that. That's why I think you have to be there. That can't happen in the silo of not being there. So it is hard." But that was my last nugget, and that's where I went away.
It happens.
Thinking,
it does
I
happen.
have to do this. Yeah.
So, just final comments from Juliet and John on this getting meetings, and perhaps then when you've got the meeting, how do you cut through? How do you make your project sort of really sing in that sort of half hour that you're going to get? Start with you, Juliet.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the same experience of not being able to get hold of people. I've done incredible amounts of detective work. I think one of the things that emerged from the pandemic was a real massive an engagement with LinkedIn. So I think people are more engaged on LinkedIn than they were before the pandemic. So I think that's a better route these days. And I really wish I'd been very organized. I'm not very good at having like a customer relationship management system. That is what I need in my life, to have tracked all of those meetings that I've ever had, and kept up to date with contact details and stuff. So I think all of that being organized stuff is great. And in terms of pitching there, I mean, it's such a noisy environment. I think you really have to have a very direct, very clear, kind of 10-minute talk through your project. It's not a great environment to show clips and video just because people are having to it's just noisy, and you've got to get headphones plugged in and all the rest of it. So I think, simpler the better. And simpler for me personally, simpler the better. and as fewer slides as possible, and just get straight to the point and try and you know, and get your idea across quickly, but then make the rest of the 20 minutes about, you know, having a conversation, getting to know, really understanding what they have on offer and what they're looking for, and building up that personal relationship, I guess.
Thank you. And John?
Yeah, echo all of that. I mean, it's an expensive business being visible at all these things, but you have to be, you know, only I've been going several years and going, oh yeah, I recognize you. Oh yeah, no, we'll have a meeting. And yeah, just bumping into people randomly is you know, you'll sit next to somebody at a you know, talk that you thought you'd missed because you thought, oh, I can't be bothered, I'll go and do something else. Actually, no, go to the talk, you sit next to somebody random, turns out it's somebody useful, you got a business card and you have a meeting. It's going to happen randomly. It's not going to be, you know, entirely predictable. But yeah, you have to go into these things in order to do it, rather than just waiting for that you know, sort of thing to come along.
And can we just, Juliet, can I just chat with you? A couple of people said, yes, I did. I talked over you just as you were saying the name of the Innovation Fund.
Oh yeah, I did just, I looked it up on my phone. It's called the Innovate UK Creative Catalyst Fund, but it is very specifically regional, and I don't know which regions it's in, so you do need to check the small print.
Yeah, that's Innovate UK. They actually do quite a lot of funding on all sorts of different sort of industries, and so the creative funding is one small pot amongst many.
I know there's a meeting on Monday, so you can sign up for it for today, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, I'm going to draw this to a close now, because there've been some incredibly useful things there. It's very difficult because it's not scientific. It's serendipitous. It requires a lot of energy. It requires a certain amount of focus, but not too much focus, because you have to take the opportunities as they come. And I think, yeah, the general message is you have to go. It is very expensive and it's not easy, but you have to be there if you want to unleash some of those opportunities that are serendipitous. And you just have to keep plugging away at as much as possible, researching down who the people are, and how you get in touch with them, and using the direct method of trying to get in touch with them rather than relying too much on the sort of the in-conference methods of getting in touch with them. I've got no idea what happens next. Oh yes, I do. It's my job to say thank you to all 5 of our lovely speakers, and we're going to move on. I'm actually going to take us on to the next bit. Thank you, everybody, and we're going to now sort of move on to focusing down on Kidscreen itself, and I want to welcome 3 people who will be key to your Kidscreen experience if you are going to Kidscreen, and key to your Kidscreen experience if you're thinking of going to Kidscreen, because we hope this might persuade you that you might find value in going. We're going to welcome Maggie Wilkins, who basically runs Kidscreen for Brunico. Lauren Bartels, who is the powerhouse of organisation at CMC, who looks after the UK Kidscreen delegation, both in advance and on site in Miami with Sarah. And Tony Humphreys is a screen specialist at DIT, who will be there for the event and available to advise and introduce where possible. And and also, of course, Ross Lewis from DIT itself. So this is going to be, well, let's start with Maggie, who's going to take us on a quick journey through where the value lies in attending Kidscreen, which will be next February in Miami. Hi, Maggie, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I did bring along a few slides, so if we can get the first slide up, thank you. So just a quick rundown of the event. Kidscreen Summit is taking place in Miami this year from February 12th, which is a Sunday, to Wednesday the 15th. It's a little bit different this year. If you have been in the past, we've been doing Monday to Thursday, and so we've switched that now to Sunday to Wednesday. So just keep that in mind. We will be releasing our program in the next week or so, but I thought I would give you just a rough idea of schedule. So the Sunday will start midday with registration, and the afternoon will feature some of our pre-sign-up networking sessions. And then that evening, we're planning on doing a welcome Super Bowl viewing party. Great opportunity for all of our UK delegates to check out the American action in the football. And then Monday to Wednesday will be full conference days. There'll be a full program of content and networking opportunities, as well as the attendees will be scheduling their own meetings in our delegate lounge or in the outdoor meeting space. I apologize if you can hear the construction behind me. It seems like Toronto is never ending in building condos, so I apologize for that. On Monday, we will have an opening cocktail party on our rooftop, as well as Tuesday, there'll be the Kidscreen Awards and cocktails. And Wednesday, we'll finish off with another cocktail party outdoors. Clearly, we like our mojitos. All the cocktail parties and the breakfast and lunch are included in your registration. It's a really great opportunity to not only use every bit of your registration fee by taking part of those lunches and the breakfast and the cocktails, but it's also another great way to just meet people serendipitously. Next slide, please. This is our location in Miami. It's right on the water. It's beautiful. When the sun is shining, the rooftop deck is a gorgeous place to take meetings. We have meeting space up there this year, so highly recommend setting any of your meetings up there if you're not doing it in the UK space in our delegate lounge. Next slide. So who attends? We have executives and creators join us from every corner of the industry from all around the world, over 50 countries usually in attendance. And that includes TV programming, acquisitions and development executives, producers, distributors, digital media content creators and distributors, licensors and marketers. But of course, it reaches farther than that. Service companies as well are in attendance. It really is anybody who you could need to connect with in order to further your business. Next slide. Why should you attend Kidscreen? It really is the best place to connect with everyone that you want to work with and build your business by networking with potential partners. Learn from industry leaders and engage in critical dialogue on issues that affect the industry. That's in both our sessions, our conference sessions, and while you're networking. It really is an incubator for creativity and having some really great conversations to develop your projects. And you also get unparalleled access to decision makers, potential partners and investors in our facilitated networking sessions. Next slide. So our facilitated networking sessions, I think, are something that makes us stand out as an event. It's something that we think is really important. There's a lot of new people who come to the event not having those connections already. As you know, some of our other speakers were talking about today, how do you get in contact with the people you need to further your project? And we offer a few networking sessions that are done with pre-sign-ups so that you can connect with those people easily, so you don't need those emails in advance. Next slide. Some of those sessions include speed pitching, coffee with, cocktails with, lunch and learn, brain pick, and pitch prep. So I'll just go quickly through what those sessions are. Speed pitching is one of our most popular. They're one-on-one 8-minute pitches with broadcasters and investors. They are like speed dating, but for television shows. It's a really great opportunity to sit in front of a bunch of buyers at once and pitch your project. Coffee with is very similar, but slightly longer format at 15 minutes. Cocktails with our group opportunity with broadcasters in a lively format that aims to loosen that networking vibe. And again, cocktails are included because the mojitos at the Intercontinental are top notch. Brain pick, join experienced execs in specialty fields who will give you advice and guidance on certain aspects of the industry. Brain pick, pitch prep. Our fast consults that we're offering at the beginning of the event, and it just helps you prepare your pitch for the summit and for your meetings later on in the week. And then lunch and learn will be roundtable discussions with industry experts. Next slide, please. This was brought up a little bit, our database, Kidscreen Exchange. It's our event database. As some of our other speakers talked about, it's hard to sometimes get an answer through the database. However, it is a really great tool to see who is in attendance, who is registered for the event for an up-to-date attendee list. You can also build your calendar around the agenda, add any important sessions to your personalized calendar, and just kind of know when you have time to schedule in those meetings. And then lastly, if we can change one more slide, I just want to say, you know, the feedback, I've been attending Kidscreen for the past 8 years that I've been with the company, and the feedback really is amazing. 98% of people come to Summit and plan to attend again, and they would recommend it to anybody in the industry. The other piece of feedback here, you'll see the 95% of found our sessions to be appropriate and informative. I find that lower just because a lot of the people don't have time to attend the content because they're so busy in meetings. But something that we did learn over the virtual world during COVID is that offering recordings of these sessions is really important to people because they're so busy on site that we are continuing to record our keynotes and our main panel rooms to offer those recordings after the event is over so that those people can catch up on that content. But that's pretty much my rundown of the event. There's our contact information there, but happy to answer any questions regarding the event and how things work there in Miami.
I've got a quick question from John Hancock. He says, when will the delegate list be available on the exchange?
Yeah, so
he should be clear here that he will need to register for Kidscreen to be able to see this year's delegate list, won't he? Because we're all on Exchange. Anyone who's ever been to Kidscreen is there in the big database, but there's limited access to the specific database for the next show.
Yeah, so the Exchange platform should be launching in the next few weeks, and you'll have access to that delegate list. We do also post it on our public website, and that should be coming as well. That'll follow the launch on Exchange. But in order to contact anybody, you'll need to join and be registered for the event to be able to do that.
And when can we sign up for the networking opportunities? When will they open, says Lucy?
Yeah, those are going to open in the new year. So we are recommending that you get registered with the UK delegation as soon as possible so that you can be in the system and ready to go when we launch those session signups in January. I should also quickly mention that there's 2 methods of signups for the networking sessions. There are first come, first serve, but there's also a lottery system. So the speed pitching and the coffee with are done through a lottery system. We found this was the most fair way of doing things because of different time zones around the world. Technology also comes into play, and it just means that you pick your top hosts, your top time slots that you want to meet with these people, and it throws it into a lottery, and then we award those slots through the lottery.
Okay, well, thank you, Maggie, and you've given us a good cue here for me to introduce Lauren, who's going to just very briefly talk about the UK delegation, which we thoroughly recommend as your best route to Kidscreen.
Definitely. I don't know how brief this will be, but I will try to go quick. So as Greg said, this is the best way to do it, basically. It's a great way for UK companies that attend Kidscreen to get the support that they need. So the cost for the delegation is £435 plus VAT. And you do need to be a UK company or a UK freelancer. So you have to be paying tax in the UK to be able to join the delegation. So there are a number of benefits that you'll receive as part of the delegation. Firstly, once you join, you'll receive a discount code for your Kidscreen ticket, for your Kidscreen Summit ticket. So the price that we get as a UK delegation is $1,595. So that's a saving of $600 on a normal price ticket, which I think at the moment is $2,195. So that's quite a good benefit already. As part of the delegation, you'll also receive your individual and company profile on our UK at Kidscreen webpage, and you'll be part of our UK showreel, which will be on the webpage and also round on our Kidscreen stand. So that'll be on a loop so everybody can see that. And talking of the stand, throughout Kidscreen, the UK will have its own area, which is where we'll be based for the week. And that's where any visitors will come who want to talk to the UK delegation members, and we'll be there pointing people in the right direction and letting them know who they need to talk to. And one of the important things about the UK stand area is that we also will have meeting tables there, which is just for the use of the UK delegation members. So anyone who's attended Kidscreen before, you'll know that space really is at a premium in the Intercontinental. So you could get into a situation, so once you've got your meeting, you've then got to find somewhere to have your meeting, and you don't want to be running around with 1 minute to go trying to find a table. So those tables are really important for UK members. And we operate a little booking system for those so that everybody can use those in the delegation. We'll also be holding breakfast briefings for the delegation. So we'll invite guests to come along and speak to you at the start of each day of Kidscreen. They're quite informal, so the idea is you bring your breakfast with you and then listen to somebody tell you something interesting. And you'll also receive an invite to the UK at Kidscreen drinks reception, which this time will take place on Saturday, so the Saturday the 11th of February. And that's going to take place at the Hyatt Regency, which is just around the corner from the Intercontinental. And that's your chance to mix with invited guests that are attending Kidscreen. We do try to curate the invite list so that you get the most benefit out of that. And as a delegation member, you'll also get input into that delegate list that we invite people to the drinks reception. And of course, one of the main things is the advice that you'll receive as being part of the delegation. So you'll have access to advice prior to the actual event. We'll be running a number of advice clinics on Zoom, which you can come along to with any questions that you might have. And then, of course, during the event itself, you'll have CMC representatives and also representatives from DIT who can give you any advice on the ground. And then, of course, any questions or worries that you might have that come up as you're preparing for Kidscreen, you can just drop us a line at CMC and we'll try and help you as best we can. So I think I rattled through that, but I think that pretty much covers it.
You did rattle, but it was good rattle. Bill Riley's asking, will we have different IP posters or signage at the UK booth? I'm not entirely sure I understand that, Bill, but if you mean, can you put up individual branding on the UK stand? The answer to that is no. We put up a general sort of UK as a quality provider of kids content branding, and DIT brand it with a lot of the great banners and so on. We don't have individual branding on our stand. And speaking of DIT, let me bring in Ross. Just briefly, Ross, why does Kidscreen matter to DIT? Can you give us some impression of the outputs that are coming through from Kidscreen year on year for you? The reason why you support it in the way you do.
Sure, absolutely. So we're really happy to be partnering once again with CMC on the Kidscreen delegation. So DIT, we're essentially about supporting exports and helping to attract inward investment with the aim of delivering economic growth across the UK. And we do this with an array of activity and events that's all designed to connect the UK supply to overseas demand. Kids media, it's a really important sector for my team. We've got a thread of supported activity that runs throughout the year, including Kidscreen, Annecy, Children's Media Conference, and MIP Junior. What is key to maintaining that support is that we are able to record on our system business successes or export wins, as we call them, that is related to our activity. That's why we ask delegates to fill out feedback forms after the event, and why my colleague in the US team, Rich Powell, who's not on the call, but he will follow up with delegates throughout the year to find out export wins that have been achieved through Kidscreen activity. And rest assured that anything you share with us, it's treated with complete confidence, and it is only for internal use. That's kind of it really. I just want to say that at DIT we're very happy to speak to anyone about Kidscreen or about any of the other activity you're involved with. So don't hesitate to get in touch with me or Tony. I assume our contact details are going to be shared with people who signed up.
Your contact details are available through us for anyone who's signed up, or indeed anyone who's thinking of signing up. Just ask Lauren. And I would say, and I wouldn't I, that the UK at Kidscreen has proved to be an incredible winner for DIT and its predecessor UKTI over the years. Some quite phenomenal figures come through, and now that they're being sort of researched fully, 6 months down the line, and we research them very specifically, to ask the question. We don't, but Rich Powell will ask you what, an actual contracted figure. So we're talking about real figures, and they are impressive. So another good reason for you to think about going to Kidscreen.
Absolutely. I will say, I look after screen, TV, film, and publishing, and across all the events that I'm involved with, Kidscreen is the one that delivers regularly the highest amount of export wins.
Good to hear. Thank you very much. And Tony, let's bring Tony in now and just sort of what will you and DIT be offering at Kidscreen, or indeed ahead of it, because of course we've got our briefing sessions, which we'll explain in a moment.
Sorry,
go ahead.
No, I think you've already mentioned there'll be some pre-briefings in advance, and then when we're there, both Sarah, Lauren, and I will be there to support the companies on the ground, and that's basically across. Obviously, as most people probably know, my background is production, and I'm part-time with DIT. So my input is also on the production, distribution, matchmaking side, but not to make Maggie's job any easier. Just to reiterate some of the points that have been made earlier, which are really important. It's an event that's dedicated to the industry, to this sector. So people interested in this sector, it is one of the few events that is, absolutely dedicated to the kids market, and does attract, as she says, all the major players. And when you bear in mind that from the export point of view, the major market for the UK is the US, it's in their backyard. They turn up. And I know Don was saying about, it is difficult to get those one-to-one meetings in certain ways. That's true right across the board. And as Shabnam was saying, it is a marathon. So when you get to these events and you've got the people that are there, you've got to use every possible opportunity. So all of these one-to-one meetings, these cocktails, these tea, you apply for everything, but you have to be clever about how you do it. So you've got to sort of decide who you think might be the people you want to attack and get to, and they put decision makers on the other side of those desks or on those tables. So the coffee with, or the cocktails with, is usually 3 or 4 executives from that broadcaster on a table with about 10 people. So you've got, 1 to 9, if you like, the broadcaster to 9, but you're sitting there 15 minutes. You've got an opportunity to get known, to ask questions, and possibly even put your idea forward. And at the end of the formal 15 minutes, there's always a bit of time to grab those executives. So the executives that you can get to are buyers. They are the real people. So you've got to maximize your time, first of all, by saying, who do I really want to go to? So when these things are announced in January, they come out as a grid. These are the people that are going to be from Apple TV, from Warner Brothers, or whoever, and you look at who's there. And if there are 3 or 4 people from Warner Brothers, you have to cleverly decide. You're in a lottery, so you may not get in. But if you get in, you want to get in with somebody you want. So instead of trying for 10 different broadcasters, use your time to go for 10 different slots with the 2 or 3 broadcasters you really want to get to. So minimize the chance, or maximize the chance of getting to see one of the people in the broadcaster that you want to meet. Because one person, doesn't matter if it's the top person or the 3 or 4, will start your relationship. So I think that's key. And the other thing, going back to one of the points John made about, Rennie said about, you might sit next to somebody in one of the sessions. Don't underestimate, when you're there, going to those sessions, particularly for that reason, but also because the same people that are likely to sit across the desk in the one-to-one that you might, if you're lucky, get in with, are telling you in advance or maybe just after your meeting what their broadcaster wants. And that's the other thing about these events, is that quite often they'll bring information to the table that is with regard to shows they're currently making. So sometimes you get at any of these events, whether it's Kidscreen or other events, when you go to some of the sessions, you're getting up-to-date intel that may not be in the press yet. And that information that you're getting might be right in your sweet spot of what you've got in your bag. So that's going back to Paul McKenzie's point of then using that intel immediately to get out and try and grab them and not be shy of grabbing those people to start that relationship again. Because it is a marathon and it is about turning up. But the final point is, I think as Dom said, make sure you're ready, to go. You can go as an exploratory. There's nothing wrong with going with an exploratory, apart from the cost. It will probably cost somebody $5,000, $4,500 to go to Miami. By the time they've registered, by the time they've got their flights, even with cheap Airbnb. If you can afford that as an exploratory visit, it's well worth it if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, make sure you've prepared when you go. And I can't remember who made the point earlier about don't forget your own backyard, because if you've got a nibble from the BBC, when you get that person in a head-to-head 5-minute sort of conversation, your access of saying, I'm in development with the BBC, or I've got interest from ITV or Channel 5, suddenly you're taken on a very different level. You're not going in with a paper format that you're looking for somebody or anybody to get involved with. So don't underestimate the value of trying to mine your own market before you get there. And also when you get there, the final point about the delegation is one of the biggest things that we have every year. Sarah always organizes a WhatsApp group, and the exchange of information and exchange between British companies with other British companies. And, you want to get, your idea might be suitable for them. I met them yesterday. You should consider that. That intel is invaluable.
Indeed it is. So thank you all very much for all the facts and figures and encouragement. We should draw this to a close because we've gone over a little bit. Thank you to our final speakers. Thank you to all our speakers today. Sarah, will you come back and join me? And we'll just say our goodbyes. We're going to leave the chat open for about 10 minutes after we finish, so that if people have a few thoughts, they might want to just sort of launch in the chat. A few of us will be sticking around. We can continue to chat with you in the chat. We'll be sharing the slides from the webinar, so you can see the slides. So Shabnam's, for example, and Maggie's, all the information there and the contact details are in there, and those slides are going up into the chat now. Well, don't forget to have a look at that grant application idea, and do think, if you are going to Kidscreen, about coming with CMC, because we do offer real fantastic support and fantastic value. One part of which is our advice clinics. So Sarah, I don't know if you want to just talk very quickly about Miami advice.
Greg had to get it in there somewhere.
Yeah, I have to get it in somewhere always.
yeah. As he's put in my notes, you have to be from the 80s to understand that one.
I'm from way before the 80s.
I think the thing that's come across while I've been listening is it's all in the prep. And for you to maximize what you can do, whether that's maximizing opportunities because you're not quite at the stage where you want to pitch, but you want that intel, you want to find out and do a soft launch test to find things out, or whatever you want to do. We are putting on, as we do every year, the Kidscreen advice clinics. And these are an hour each session where we bring people together and we can talk through different topics that have come up. What we're about is making sure you land out in Miami having got yourself ready, because the biggest thing you can do is make sure you've got your spreadsheet, make sure you know who you're meeting, make sure you know what you want to do. And while the magic does happen in the corridor, it's useful to know what corridor to go down. So we've got 3 booked in the diary, one for the 9th of December, one for the 13th of January, and one for the 27th. And they're at 1 p.m. And I think if once you've joined the group, as this is for people who have signed up and delegates, then Lauren will let you have that. For those of you that are looking at whether or not you want to come, as Greg said, we're contactable and you can have a chat with us before you decide. However, the sooner you decide and the sooner you get into the system, the more you're going to get out of it. So over to you, Greg.
Yeah, and somebody's just asked how can we have access to the recording of this event, and that should be on our YouTube channel. Well, let's say by about sort of Monday, by end of play on Monday, I would have thought. Maybe before that if we get our act together over the weekend. So this is one of many videos on the Children's Media Conference YouTube channel. And in fact, we'll be launching a whole series of new videos from January next year as part of the CMC 2023 proposition leading up to CMC itself in July in Sheffield. So after all that heavy-handed marketing, perhaps we should leave you in peace. Use the chat for any further questions. So we'll shut down the Q&A. Thanks for all the comments there. Thank you all for watching. Thank you to all of our speakers who have been, as always, fantastic and so helpful and so caring and sharing, which is what is the big bonus about working in kids media. And see you I won't see you, but Sarah will see you in Miami, and
see you in Miami.
Lauren will see you in Miami, and Tony will see you in Miami, and a whole bunch of you will be in Miami, and good luck to you. We'll just hang around a little while to have a further chat in the chat room, about 10 minutes. Bye.
See you, bye.